Hello folks, another video today. This is gonna be a little driving ramble response to primarily to Jeffrey McMahon, but also to TGV, because it was spawned by something TGV said in response to Jeffrey McMahon, and then Jeffrey did a video last night, I think, on minimalism versus watch bloat. So it started with TGV said something in a recent video a day or two ago that he's decided he's not going to try to be a minimalist. That he felt like he was influenced by the meme out there that I think both Jeffrey and I have been speaking for, and actually I think a lot of collectors, anyone from Purple Haze 5995 to Locutus de Borg, the elder statesman of the watch community, to Archie, Lakshmi, to anyone, which is this idea of minimalism in a collection, that less is more, that it's better to have, that somehow it's objectively better to have, 2, 3, 4, 5 watches in your collection than it is to have 10, 15, 20. And TGV expressed the feeling that it sounded like he was buying into it, but it wasn't natural to him. That actually he prefers having a larger collection, and that he's decided to embrace who he truly is, which is awesome. That's what I encourage. That is my watch philosophy, actually life philosophy to some degree. So TGV said that, and he said that he was influenced particularly by Jeffrey McMahon in this regard, or he mentioned Jeff. And I think he mentioned me too, I'm not sure. I like it when I'm mentioned. Anyways, so Jeff did a video about watch bloat and versus minimalism, and he mentioned some email conversations he and I have been having, and I think he mentioned that I said that I think maybe the minimalism has something to do with guilt. Guilt with the money that's being spent on, luxury versus necessity, that sort of thing. So I wanted to just throw a few words in about this. Because I too have struggled with this idea of minimalism versus bloat. Early on in my first 2 or 3 years of collecting, when I was only collecting tier 1 and 2 watches, my collection ballooned to as large as 30 watches. That's right, I had 30 watches at one point. Jeffrey, I think he said he had 55, I think, at one point. 55, that number sticks in my head for some reason. And at the time, I didn't necessarily feel that quality of bloat, but I think at one point, I remember having like 2 boxes. I had like one box which had about a dozen watches that I wore, and then another box that had a dozen watches that I didn't wear and that I was trying to sell. So for me, it might not have been as much the size of the collection as having watches that I didn't wear. So I think that's like one key point that I would like to bring up, that maybe the actual number, that maybe there's actually no perfect number. I mean, even though I've said in the past, I feel like everyone has their sort of perfect range, and I've said that my perfect range is somewhere between 5 and 8. I don't know if there's actually a perfect range for anyone, except that some people tend to prefer larger, some people prefer smaller, and that what bloat isn't an objective number. Bloat is when you have watches that you never wear, and they're just clogging up it's like wasted calories, fat cells. A similar thing would be the whole idea of case size, bezel size. Some people I've heard say that no one should ever wear a watch over 42 millimeters. This is again the objectivist crap that is clogging up the airways, in my opinion. It really depends upon wrist size. It really depends on wrist size, human being size, forearm size. It also depends upon personal tastes. Some people like the look and feel of a big old dial on your wrist. I personally, my tastes have gotten smaller, and then they've kind of stabilized so that my ideal range is, I will consider any watch, and the 40 millimeter is the smallest I'll consider, although I guess I would consider a 39 eventually, up to, I will look at 45, 46, but only on rare occasions. Really, my ideal range is 41 to 44. 41 to 44 is the ideal, the sweet spot for me. 44 for me, like my Blackbird is basically 44. That's about as large as I like to go. I don't feel like I want that watch to be any, in a way that, another way of putting it, that 41 to 44 is the range where I don't feel like a watch, I wish a watch was any larger or any smaller. A 41 millimeter watch, I don't feel like it needs to be any larger, but I wouldn't want it any smaller. A 44 doesn't need to be any smaller, but I wouldn't want it any larger. That's what I mean. So, but my point is that it's, the idea of bloat is similar to watch size in that it really depends upon the individual and their own physical size. A guy with an 8-inch wrist can handle a 47 millimeter watch, right? A guy with a 6.25-inch wrist probably shouldn't wear anything over about 40, maybe 42. You know what I mean? Now, when I say shouldn't, I hate saying that to some degree, but there is sort of an aesthetic that I mean, again, it's like this, it's always this like slippery slope, because on one hand, I want to say it's completely subjective and that everyone should just enjoy what they enjoy. And if you're a skinny little guy with a 6-inch wrist and you like 44 millimeter watches, then more power to you, enjoy it. But on the other hand, I think it looks a little silly. When it gets too big, it just looks a little silly. But I will still like you if that's who you are. So I do think bloat has a lot to do with, it's more how you, it's a feeling, right? It's a feeling that you have. It's not some objective thing like any collection over 10 is considered bloat. I think what it is, it's any amount of watches that go beyond what you can comfortably wear within a month or two, right? Now, some people, there was a, I don't think he comments on YouTube, but a regular at Jeff's blog, Angelo, had I think about 50 watches, and he was totally happy with it. He would wear a different watch every day, and so it would be ridiculous of me to say no, that's wrong. That's wrong collecting, Angelo. No, you enjoy the collect. You figure out what works for you. So. But what I do find interesting, and I'm kind of just going over old territory here, but what is new, like what I want to bring forth about this idea of minimalism or bloat, is that not only is it specific to this of the idea of excess, like bloat comes from excess, but that, well, we need to question our assumptions about what the proper size is. So the minimalist, I mean, I think both Jeff and I have been questioning this idea of minimalism. Like, is that real? What is that really about? Is it because we really prefer a small collection, or is it because there's some other thing going on, like feelings of guilt about having too many watches, or is it totally financially based? I actually think for me, it's largely financially based. I mean, I do like the minimalist aesthetic. I'm more of a, this is why I like Zen Buddhism, for instance. Zen is very minimalist. It's very, it's narrowed down the entire tradition of Buddhism to just like this core practice and awakening process. And I like that philosophically even. And I prefer like that Japanese garden where it's bringing together complex things into a cohesive, almost simplicity, right? But on the other hand, I also like complex dials. So it really depends. I like chronographs better than non-chronos, generally speaking. So I do think, though, this is something I actually had a video request for Jeff. I asked him what what would his collection be, and how would he approach collecting if money wasn't an issue? Jeff is a college professor, and his wife is also a teacher, and so like me, he's kind of like a middle-class guy, right? With kids. We're not wealthy people, but we're comfortable. We're comfortable in our income, and so there's a limit, though. We have to think about, you know, how much we spend. We can't just spend willy-nilly. And I think what the degree to which we push that is the degree to which we feel that sort of guilt and watch nausea. And I know for myself, I've come to a point where I've kind of capped how much I'm going to spend. I'm not. So for me, the minimalism has a lot to do with not wanting to put any more money into watch collecting, at least for the time being, at least for the next year or two, than I've already put in. I'm fine. I don't need to sell anything off. I have the existing collection that I can swap around, right? I can swap around the pieces, so to speak, the money, right? So where do I want to put it? So I have a little bit of room to play. But if I had, so I asked Jeff, like, what would his collection be like? And I told him, like, I'll do a video on this myself. I'm thinking, something like the guidelines being, if you could happily buy whatever tier 5 watch or below that you wanted on a somewhat regular basis, with the occasional tier 6 thrown in. I'm not talking about being like a Qatari billionaire where you can happily buy a Roger Dubuis Excalibur Quatuor, which is a $1.1 million watch. I'm talking about, a $50,000 collection, something like that. Maybe more, but just if the income allowed for higher level purchases where you could pretty much buy what you wanted within the tier 5, maybe 6 range and below. Like what would your collection be? I will say, without going into details, a lot of what I own, I would still own. I would still happily own. I probably wouldn't worry about minimalism, though. I would probably say, okay, I'm just going to buy what I want and not worry about selling, and have a collection of watches. And maybe occasionally, when I feel like there's just watches that I don't ever wear or no longer like, sell them off to fund new watches, Maybe I tend to be over generous with money. I was the guy who would buy rounds of drinks for everybody in my 20s when we were going out all the time. Lost a lot of money that way. Anyways, so yeah, it would definitely change my spending or my collecting habits and my approach to collecting. I would really think more about a larger collection, like in terms of, covering certain bases. Like, for instance, I'd probably have a wider range of Seamasters. I'd make sure that I'd probably want to have a dozen different Omegas, and I'd probably want a Rolex or two. Yes, I would even throw in a Rolex or two. So yeah, it would be a totally different approach. And I'd probably end up with a collection of 20, 30 watches eventually, maybe more. I would like to have a little mini museum of dive watches, centered on dive watches with different focus areas, like having an Omega sub-collection, a Breitling sub-collection, one or two Breguets, a couple horology pieces like a Blancpain or a JLC maybe. I don't know. It's, and this may be someday something that I can gradually build towards. But yeah, my point being, I do think the minimalism is at least partially due to limited finances and trying to be, I wouldn't say frugal, because watch collecting on any level is not frugal. Unless you're like a millionaire only buying tier 2 watches, it's not, there's no frugality to it. It's just it's excess by its very nature. So yeah, So those are the main points that I wanted to make. That bloat is directly related to it's directly related to having watches that you don't wear and feeling like they're just kind of bloating, they're clogging up your life. And that minimalism has a lot to do with money. Now again, I know there's some people that are in much better financial shape than I that still like minimalism. So it really depends upon the individual. All right, anyways, I am here picking up my daughter, so I'm gonna take off. All right, later. Particularly by Jeffrey McMahon in this regard, or he mentioned Jeff, and I think he mentioned me too, I'm not sure. I like it when I'm mentioned. Anyways, so Jeff did a video about watch bloat and versus minimalism, and he mentioned, you know, some email conversations he and I have been having, and I think he mentioned that I said that I think maybe the minimalism has something to do with guilt. So it started with TGV said something in a recent video a day or two ago that he's decided he's not going to try to be a minimalist. That he felt like he was influenced by the meme out there that I think both Jeffrey and I have been speaking for, and actually I think a lot of collectors, anyone from, you know, Purple Haze 5995 to Locutus de Borg, the elder statesman of the watch community, to Archie Lakshmi, to anyone, which is this idea of minimalism in a collection, that less is more, that it's better to have, that somehow it's objectively better to have, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 watches in your collection than it is to have 10, 15, 20. And TGV expressed the feeling that it sounded like he was buying into it, but it wasn't natural to him. That actually he prefers having a larger collection, and that he's decided to embrace who he truly is, which is awesome. That's what I encourage. That is my watch philosophy, actually life philosophy to some degree. So TGV said that, and he said that he was influenced. Hello, folks. Another video today. This is gonna be a little driving ramble response to primarily to Jeffrey McMahon, but also to TGV, because it was spawned by something TGV said in response to Jeffrey McMahon, and then Jeffrey did a video last night, I think, on minimalism versus watch bloat.